Boston in winter, snow blanketing the entire Beacon Avenue, where glass buildings reflected the cold light of power. There Ethan Caldwell, a young billionaire, notorious for his ruthlessness, suddenly collapsed after an accident, only to wake up and see a completely unfamiliar face by his hospital bed. Naomi Carter, a nurse from an ordinary background. Amid the high society filled with prejudice, their love flared up like an untimely fire, warm, defiant, yet fragile before schemes and hatred. They would have to learn how to fight against society, and more importantly, against the fears within their hearts, to achieve a happiness never meant for them. Boston at the end of January rarely showed mercy to anyone daring to test the limits of its weather. A sudden snowstorm swept down upon the city, turning the roads along the Charles River into shimmering strips of frosted glass, coated with a thin sheet of ice and swirling snowflakes. A silver Aston Martin sped forward in that blinding white, as if defying everything. Behind the wheel was Ethan Caldwell, 37, a tech billionaire famed for his cold-bloodedness, dubbed by the press as the ice strategist of the high-tech medical industry. The car's headlights refracted through layers of snow, casting harsh light onto his tense face. His grey-blue eyes stared straight ahead, unblinking, as though driving while calculating his next moves in his mind. On the passenger seat, his phone vibrated incessantly with urgent messages from Daniel Pierce, his longtime associate. "The board is getting impatient. If you don't come now, the Hartwell deal will collapse." Ethan gripped the steering wheel tighter. He hated being pressured, but Daniel wasn't wrong. This acquisition was a strategic keystone for Caldwell Biomedical, the company he had built from scratch after the devastating loss of his fiancée, Claire Ashford, 4 years earlier. That loss had turned Ethan into a different man. From a young, ambitious, lively soul, he had become someone who knew only work, avoiding all emotion. The pain of Claire's death on the operating table due to a careless doctor still seared his mind. In the public's eyes, Ethan was a tech hero who had transformed his personal tragedy into the drive to invent medical devices that saved thousands of lives. But deep down, he was only a man who had locked himself in ice, never to be wounded again. The wind howled outside, snow striking the windshield in a relentless rhythm. Ethan accelerated, determined to cross the bridge over the Charles before the road closed. Suddenly, the headlights reflected oddly off the pavement black ice. He had only an instant to feel the car skidding, spinning sideways like a loose arrow. The world turned in a screech of grinding metal. A violent impact hurled him forward. The airbag deployed, and then everything went dark. A few miles away, inside the emergency department at Boston General Hospital, Nurse Naomi Carter tightened her thin blue coat, inhaling deeply before starting her night shift. At 29, with 8 years of experience, Naomi was no stranger to winter accidents. But snowstorms always bring a special kind of chaos. Cars skidding, homeless people succumbing to hypothermia, and heart attacks from shoveling snow. The hospital became a battlefield on nights like these, and Naomi was one of its silent soldiers. She was used to pressure but never to fatigue. She quickly tied her curly brown hair back in the break room and tucked her phone into her pocket. A text from her younger brother Marcus glowed on the screen. "Don't overwork yourself. I'll study hard. Don't worry about tuition." Naomi gave a faint smile. How could she not worry? Their mother, Carmen, worked night shifts at a small restaurant to earn extra cash, while Marcus studied law at Harvard under a mountain of loans. Naomi was the family's anchor, and this grueling nursing job was the only path to keeping them afloat. The intercom cut through her thoughts. "Prepare for trauma. Traffic accident victim. Male. Unconscious. Multiple injuries." Naomi slipped on her gloves and rushed to the trauma bay. The doors burst open, a gust of cold wind blowing in with a stretcher soaked in snow. On it lay a man in an expensive suit, blood staining the white collar of his shirt. Dark hair matted, face pale. One of the paramedics shouted, "Victim, Ethan Caldwell, 37. Multiple trauma, possible head injury, fractured left leg, blood pressure dropping fast." Naomi froze for a second. The name wasn't unfamiliar. The press, medical journals, and TV all had mentioned it. Ethan Caldwell, the cold billionaire, the medical tech tycoon. But lying before her wasn't the polished image from Forbes's cover. It was a battered body, weak breath, a life as fragile as a candle in the wind. She quickly quelled her surprise and focused on the task. Bring him into room 3. I need an 18-gauge V line, prep the cardiac monitor, and call CT immediately. Her voice was firm, accustomed to the chaos of the ER. In the rush, Naomi pressed her hand over the patient's, leaning close to his ear. Mr. Caldwell, I'm Naomi. You're in the hospital. You're safe now. Please, hold on. His eyes flickered open momentarily, and the grey-blue gaze shivered through her. Beneath the confusion and pain, there was still the sharp glint of a powerful will. He tried to utter a few broken words, but Naomi placed her hand on his shoulder, whispering, "Don't speak, let us work." And strangely, his trembling hand sought hers, gripping weakly as though clinging to life. In the hours that followed, the team worked tirelessly 4 fluids, CT scans, splinting the fractured leg, and treating the head wound. Naomi stayed close, monitoring the machines, murmuring reassurances. Even knowing the patient was semi-conscious, she believed a gentle voice could anchor him to reality. When the crisis passed, Dr. Susan Bennett announced, "Condition stabilized. He'll need leg surgery and months of recovery, but he's out of danger." Naomi peeled off her gloves, sweat beading on her forehead. Before her lay Ethan Caldwell, no longer the cold billionaire or business legend. Just a man felled by a snowstorm, alone, needing a hand to hold him to life. Ethan awoke in the stark white room of the recovery unit, harsh fluorescent light stabbing his eyes. The antiseptic smell enveloped him, memories of Claire's death slicing through his mind like a blade. His heart pounded, thoughts in disarray. For a moment, he thought he was back in that operating room 4 years ago, hearing the doctor say Claire hadn't made it. But this time, a warm voice pierced the fear. "You're awake?" He turned and saw Naomi Carter checking the monitor. Deep brown eyes, hair neatly tucked under a cap. Unlike the shallow faces from press conferences and negotiations, this one was patient and caring. "Mr. Caldwell, you were in a car accident. We've stabilized your left leg. You'll need surgery and a long recovery. But you're safe now." Naomi spoke slowly, keeping her voice steady to reassure him. Ethan didn't reply, only stared. His cracked lips moved faintly. "Naomi." Naomi stiffened slightly. Many patients had called nurses by name, but she sensed something different in his eyes, as if her name was the only thread holding him to the world. "Yes, I'm here," she said softly, placing her hand over his. His hand trembled, gripping hers like a plea. The door swung open. Oliver Grant, Ethan's longtime assistant, entered with a group of lawyers. Gaunt-faced, he rushed forward. "Mr. Caldwell, thank God you're awake. But I have bad news. The Hartwell deal collapsed. Daniel Pierce is managing the situation." Ethan tried to rise, but Naomi stopped him. "You can't discuss business in this condition." Her voice was firm, so different from the gentleness before. Oliver frowned, his eyes flashing with the faint disdain the wealthy often had for young nurses. But Ethan was different. He gave a slight nod, signaling Oliver to be silent. "No. Later. Now. Let me rest." When they left, Naomi adjusted the IV line, frowning. "You can't put yourself under more stress. One more blood pressure spike and it's dangerous." Ethan gave a faint smile, tired, but strangely genuine. "You aren't afraid of me?" The question surprised her. "Afraid of what?" "They call me a cold machine in the papers. People usually avoid me." His gaze blurred, heavy with fatigue. "Naomi Sayed, I've cared for hundreds of patients. Everyone in a hospital bed is the same, vulnerable, needing to be saved. I see a man who almost lost his life, not a billionaire." Her words silenced Ethan. Her answer was like a crack in thick ice, in a mind long used to suspicion and power struggles. In the following days, Naomi was assigned as Ethan's primary nurse. She frequently checked his vitals, adjusted his medications, and helped him practice breathing after the trauma. Each time Ethan tried to defy medical orders, Naomi shut him down with unyielding firmness. "You cannot read financial reports right now," she said. yanking a folder from his hands. "That's my company. I must. You must be alive for your company to have a boss." Naomi's tone was calm as she carried the folder out. Ethan watched helplessly. Yet instead of anger, as he would feel toward others, a strange calm settled in him. Her firmness wasn't to challenge him, but to protect him. At night, when the hospital was quiet, Ethan woke from nightmares of Claire, drenched in sweat, panicked. In the dim light, Naomi sat beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You're safe. This is Boston General, not that operating room." Ethan stared at her. In those brown eyes, he saw an understanding no one had given him in years. A simple nurse, from a humble background, yet strong enough to touch the deepest part of his frozen heart. On the third evening, snow still fell outside the window, white flakes swirling in the glow of street lamps. Naomi was writing notes when Ethan spoke softly. "Have you ever thought your life could change in a single moment?" She looked up, surprised. "You mean the accident?" "Not just that." Ethan gazed into the distance. 4 years ago, a routine surgery took away the woman I loved most. Since then, I've turned every pain into work. I thought I'd be at peace if I saved enough other lives. But I was wrong. Tonight, when the car lost control, I thought I would die, and the only thing I remembered was Claire's face. Then, your voice." Naomi was silent. This was no longer a patient and a nurse. This was a man unburdening himself after years of silence. She spoke quietly. "I lost my father in a work accident when I was 16. I know that helplessness. But I chose to keep living instead of letting the pain consume me." Ethan looked at her for a long time. In his eyes, for the first time in years, flickered a tiny spark of hope. He nodded slightly, then closed his eyes, letting Naomi's voice guide him into sleep. That night, Naomi left the room later than usual. She stood in the hallway, watching snow fall beyond the glass. Part of her felt compassion for this man admired by the world, yet utterly alone. But another part was wary. Their relationship should remain within professional bounds. Naomi didn't know that the thread of fate had already tightened at that moment, drawing her life into Ethan Caldwell's orbit. Love, prejudice, power, and justice would collide repeatedly on this stormy path. And it all began with tonight's snowstorm. The pale morning sun slipped through the curtains of the expansive windows in the Commonwealth Avenue, Boston penthouse. The luxurious space glittered with the light reflecting off expensive oil paintings, imported marble tables, and shelves lined with leather-bound books. Yet it all felt as cold as a luxury hotel rather than a place someone truly lived. Ethan Caldwell had been brought back here only 4 days after the accident. Doctors had advised him to remain hospitalized, but he insisted on returning home, claiming that work waits for no one. In truth, Ethan had never been comfortable in hospitals. They reminded him too much of Claire's death. Naomi Carter stood in the sprawling living room, watching medical staff hurriedly install equipment. A blood pressure monitor, a specialized hospital bed, a walker frame. The director of Elite Care Solutions had called her personally, stressing that this was their most demanding client, requiring absolute discretion. Naomi remembered the warning clearly. He's notorious for being cold, impatient, and willing to fire anyone within a day. If you can last, this contract will be a milestone in your career. Naomi inhaled deeply, reminding herself not to buckle under pressure. This was still just a patient, no matter how wealthy. Someone still needs care. But the moment she entered the main bedroom, she understood why so many nurses before her had walked out. Ethan sat propped up against pillows, his left leg cast on a support frame, surrounded by a chaos of financial documents, a laptop, and 3 phones buzzing incessantly. His voice was hoarse but commanding. "Repeat it, Pierce. The Hartwell project still holds strategic value. I want the latest report on my desk by noon." He looked up, spotting Naomi in the doorway. His gray-blue eyes flashed with irritation. "You're late." Naomi glanced at her watch. Exactly 7 a.m., the precise time in her contract. She swallowed her reaction, stepped forward, and placed a tray of medication and a light breakfast on the bedside table. "I'm here on schedule. You need to take your painkillers and eat something before working." "Not necessary." Ethan turned back to the screen. Naomi exhaled. walked straight over, and unplugged the chargers from all 3 phones. The screens went black. Ethan jerked upright, his face darkening. "What do you think you're doing?" "My job." Naomi's tone was calm but firm, so resolute that even Oliver Grant, standing quietly by the cabinet, held his breath. "Your blood pressure has shot up to 160. If you keep this up, you could suffer a brain hemorrhage at any moment. And then there'll be no one left to sign those contracts you're obsessed with." The air tightened. Ethan was not used to being challenged. Yet Naomi's gaze never wavered, blunt, fearless, the kind of honesty almost no one dared to give him. He only stared at her for a moment, then gave a faint, sardonic smile. "You're different from the others." Naomi adjusted his pillows and poured water into a glass. "Different or not, it doesn't matter. I'm here to help you recover. But if you refuse to cooperate, I'll leave immediately, no matter how high the pay." Oliver cleared his throat, interjecting cautiously, "Naomi, perhaps you should be more gentle." "Mr. Caldwell." "That's enough, Oliver." Ethan cut him off. Turning to Naomi, his voice was, for the first time, less icy. "Fine. You want me to take the medicine? Fine." He grabbed the glass, swallowed the pill, then set it down hard. "But don't think you can give me orders in my house." Naomi didn't flinch. She noted it in his chart. Inside, she knew the battle had only just begun. That afternoon, when Naomi returned to check his blood pressure, she found Ethan slumped over his laptop, dark circles under his eyes, still typing furiously. The screen was filled with endless spreadsheets. Naomi quietly closed the computer and pulled a chair close. "You cannot work 18 hours a day in this condition. Your brain needs rest." Ethan opened his eyes, voice low. "You don't understand. If I let go, Daniel Pierce will steal the company. I lost Claire, I cannot lose Caldwell Biomedical, too." Naomi sat down beside the bed, meeting his gaze. "You're confusing loss with fear. Controlling everything doesn't make you safer, it just breaks you down." Ethan was silent. Her words cut into the wound he had hidden deep. He turned his face away, voice soft. "Claire used to say I'd destroy myself if I didn't stop." Maybe she was right. Naomi didn't reply immediately. She quietly drew the curtains, softening the light, then placed a bowl of hot soup in front of him. "Eat. Pierce won't need to lift a finger to win if you collapse. Surviving is already a form of defiance." Ethan looked at the soup, then at her. He didn't see an employee for the first time, but someone daring to challenge the darkness within him. Night fell. Naomi was writing medical notes in the living room when Oliver approached, lowering his voice. "Do you know what you're doing, Mr. Caldwell isn't used to being controlled. If you keep this up, I fear." Naomi cut him off. "Do you think I'm here to pamper him? Then you should hire someone else. I'm not here to serve food and nod. I'm here to keep him alive." Oliver paused, surprised. In all his years working for Ethan, he had rarely seen anyone speak like that. He looked at Naomi, his expression tinged with respect. "Maybe that's exactly what makes you different." Outside the window, Boston lay under snow, streetlights glowing faintly gold. Inside the silent penthouse, 2 people from worlds apart, a cold tech billionaire and a resilient nurse from a working-class family, began a quiet battle. A battle to reclaim life, peace, and perhaps something greater, something neither dared to name. Naomi entered the main bedroom the next morning with a medicine tray and a simple breakfast. The vast room was bathed in light, yet devoid of warmth, just documents, medical devices, and heavy silence. Ethan was awake, leaning against pillows, eyes fixed on his laptop screen. He didn't look up when she came in. Naomi set the tray down, calm. "Your blood pressure hit 150 last night. If you refuse food again this morning, I'll call Dr. Bennett to readmit you to the hospital." This time, Ethan lifted his head. His grey eyes glinted with annoyance, then curved into a mocking smile. "Do you know who you're talking to?" Naomi crossed her arms, standing firm. "A patient with multiple injuries who needs help, putting on clothes and taking pills on time. I don't care about Forbes rankings." The room fell silent. At the door, Oliver braced for the familiar storm of his boss's anger, but Ethan only gave a short, hoarse laugh, more surprised than furious. "You're reckless." Naomi pulled out a chair, and opened her notebook. Not reckless. I don't want to see another person die of stubbornness. My father died in a construction accident because he ignored warnings. I won't allow that to happen again. Ethan went still. Her story brought back a shadow of Claire, who had once begged him to slow down, to listen to his body. He hadn't, and he had lost her forever. That afternoon, Naomi rearranged the living room, tidied documents, cleared cables, and opened the curtains for natural light. Ethan hobbled out on crutches, scowling. "Who gave you permission to touch my papers?" Naomi turned calmly. "I did. Your environment directly affects recovery. You don't need a battlefield of paperwork. You need space to breathe." He moved closer, eyes burning with restrained fury. "How many people would pay millions just to hear me direct a project? And yet you, a nurse, tell me to clear it away." Naomi didn't butcher. "I'm not here to admire your power. I'm here to make sure you live longer. If you don't want that, sign the termination papers. But I won't stand by while you kill yourself." The tension was like a drawn bowstring. Oliver rushed in. "Mr. Caldwell, Naomi only wants what's best for you." Ethan raised a hand to silence him. He stared at Naomi for a long moment, then suddenly dropped into a chair, voice low. "Fine, you win, but don't think I'm easily subdued." Naomi only shrugged, returning to her notes as if nothing had happened. Inside, she knew she had just cracked the armor Ethan wore. Late that night, Naomi was reading files in the living room when a hoarse scream echoed from the bedroom. She rushed in. Ethan thrashed in sweat, eyes shut, breathing ragged. "Claire, don't go." Naomi quickly grasped his hand, shaking gently. "Ethan, wake up. You're safe. This isn't an operating room. This is Boston." His eyes snapped open, wild at first, then slowly focused on Naomi's face. His panic ebbed, clinging to her presence as to reality. He exhaled, voice broken. "The nightmare, it keeps coming back. I see her, dying, before me." Naomi sat at the edge of the bed, not pulling her hand away. "That pain won't vanish, but you're still here, and you can choose how to live. Do you want to let the past torment you, or find another way?" Ethan looked at her hesitantly, as if weighing something he had never dared before. He gave a faint nod, whispering, "Maybe. I need someone to remind me." Naomi said nothing more. She pulled the blanket up and set a water glass nearby. In the silence, only the wind outside and the steady beeping of the monitor filled the air. Yet both of them knew. A fragile but powerful bond of trust had formed between them, stronger than any contract. The next day, Ethan awoke later than usual. Pale sunlight traced the sharp lines of his face. Naomi entered, finding him quietly gazing out the window. No laptop, no phone. Just a man deep in thought. Morning meds. She set the tray down. He took the pill without protest. Then, unexpectedly, he asked, "Naomi, why did you choose this job? With your intelligence and grit, you could have done anything." Naomi was caught off guard by the question. She sat down, replying softly, "Because I know what loss feels like. I know what it's like to watch someone you love die from an accident that could have been prevented. I don't want other families to go through that. And I need to provide for my mother and brother." Ethan nodded slightly. He studied her for a long time, then murmured, "You're unlike anyone I've ever met." Naomi smiled, standing. "Good. Then you won't get bored with me easily." Her half-joking words made Ethan chuckle faintly. Though weary, that laugh warmed the penthouse more than any heater ever could. In the days that followed, Ethan remained stubborn, but Naomi noticed him yielding bit by bit, eating more regularly, cutting down work hours, listening to medical advice. Resistance gave way to conversations, sometimes even smirks of dry humor. And in those rare moments, Naomi glimpsed another side of him, not the ruthless billionaire in the press, but a man exhausted by grief, slowly learning to trust again. Naomi knew. The road ahead was long, still full of storms, but she could feel that, right here in this cold penthouse, a seed had been planted, the seed of change, and perhaps of something even more fragile than life itself, faith in human connection. March in Boston. Snow began to melt. revealing sidewalks mottled with dirty water. But winter had not yet passed in the high-rise penthouse, at least not for Ethan Caldwell. 6 weeks after the snowstorm night, he was still on crutches, left leg in a cast, body aching. Yet the most striking change was not in his body, but in how he looked at the woman beside him, Naomi Carter. Every morning, Naomi appeared in her simple blouse, hair neatly tied, medical chart in hand. She measured his blood pressure, checked his heartbeat, and reminded him to practice breathing and stretching. Ethan had first dismissed these as tedious routines. Still, slowly, he realized he was beginning to look forward to them, not because of the medicine or the exercises, but because of her warm voice, patient smile, and those brown eyes that never once shied away from meeting his. One afternoon, Naomi set up the parallel bars in the living room for him to practice walking. The wide glass doors opened to the city, afternoon light spilling in golden, highlighting the sweat on Ethan's brow as he struggled with each step. "Slow down." Naomi stood close by, hand ready to catch him if he fell. Ethan gritted his teeth, sweat dampening his collar. "I don't need someone holding me." "True. But you need someone to tell you to stop before you collapse." Naomi's tone was steady. He shifted his weight on the crutches, nearly losing his balance. In that instant, Naomi caught him, her arm circling his waist. Their bodies touched, close enough for Ethan to feel her heartbeat. He looked up, meeting Naomi's gaze closer than ever before. They stood frozen for several seconds, just a coincidental touch during therapy, yet the air thickened, their breaths mingling. Ethan whispered, "This is the first time I don't feel completely broken." Naomi let go, stepping back, trying to keep her tone neutral. "That's because of the exercises, not me." But her cheeks flushed, and Ethan did not miss it. In the days that followed, their closeness became harder to deny. Naomi's hand was on his shoulder while guiding his breathing, the way she looked up from her notes, and the fleeting smile when he followed orders, all of it became things Ethan found himself waiting for. One night, as Naomi was about to leave the penthouse, Ethan called after her, "Naomi." She stopped, coat in hand. "Yes?" He hesitated rarely without his usual certainty. "Thank you for not leaving, like the others." Naomi froze. In his voice, she heard a raw loneliness the press had never spoken of. She answered softly, "I'm not here for the money. I'm here because you deserve to survive, Ethan." It was the first time she called him by name, without the distant Mr. Caldwell. Ethan watched her go, his heart beating faster than usual. That weekend, Naomi unexpectedly brought her younger brother, Marcus Carter, for a visit. 25, tall and lean, neatly dressed in a modest suit, with the sharp eyes of a Harvard law student. Marcus shook Ethan's hand, gaze steady. "I've heard much about you, Mr. Caldwell. Your medical technology has saved many lives. But for me, what matters more is this: my sister's safety in your hands." Ethan raised an eyebrow, sensing the protective weight in his tone. "I owe her my life, and I don't take that lightly," Naomi interjected, half embarrassed, half stern. "Marcus." But Marcus didn't relent. He looked directly at Ethan. "Naomi has carried our family since she was 16. She doesn't need a billionaire who plays and discards. She needs someone who values who she truly is." The air grew taut. Ethan was silent for a moment, then nodded. "You're right. And I don't intend to play." Naomi looked between them, torn between annoyance and gratitude. She knew Marcus only wanted to protect her, but feared Ethan would be offended. Yet Ethan merely gave a faint smile, his eyes glinting with rare respect. That evening, after Marcus had left, Naomi was tidying dishes when Ethan spoke. "Your brother's sharp mind. I see myself at his age, wanting to control everything to protect those I care about." Naomi looked up, surprised by the comparison. "You and Marcus are very different. Maybe, but we share one thing. We both know you're worth protecting." Ethan's voice was low, his eyes never leaving her. Naomi froze. In that moment, the distance between patient and nurse seemed to dissolve. What remained were two people, both carrying their own scars, finding something unnamed in each other. One chilly late March afternoon, Naomi prepared Ethan's next therapy session. She adjusted the parallel bars and secured the pads beneath so he wouldn't slip. Ethan emerged on crutches, face taut but eyes steady. "Ready?" Naomi asked, half encouraging, half commanding. Never ready for pain, Ethan smirked faintly, setting his crutches aside, gripping the bars. Naomi stood just behind, her hand lightly resting on his arm. "One small step. I'm here." He strained, and his injured leg was stiff, but he pushed forward. His legs trembled, faltering. Naomi instantly wrapped an arm around his waist, steadying him. Her body pressed close against his back, their breaths mingling. Ethan lifted his gaze, his grey-blue eyes locking onto her brown ones. In that instant, every professional boundary, every moral line blurred. His voice was husky. "Naomi, if I fall, would you let go?" Her breath quickened, but she answered softly, "No, I never abandon my patients." Ethan searched her eyes, then whispered, "Good, because I don't want to be abandoned ever again." Naomi steadied herself, guiding him back to the chair. She tried to keep her voice even. "That's enough for today. Muscles need time to recover." But her hands still trembled from the closeness. That night, after dinner, Ethan reclined in his chair, a glass of wine untouched on the table. Naomi cleared the dishes, pretending not to notice his eyes following her. Finally, he spoke. "I want to ask you something." "What is it?" Naomi looked up. Suppose I weren't a billionaire, just a man with a broken leg after an accident, how would you treat me?" Naomi faltered. It sounded like a challenge, but his gaze was strangely sincere. She answered, "I'd treat you the same. Because I'm a nurse, and because every person deserves care." Ethan gave a faint smile. "And when I'm no longer a patient?" Naomi startled, nearly dropping the bowl in her hand. She turned away quickly, voice lowered. "We shouldn't talk about crossing lines. You know that." He was silent, but the smile lingered. Not the arrogant smirk of a mogul, but the smile of a man finding light in darkness. On Sunday, Naomi brought Marcus again for dinner. The atmosphere was lighter, though Marcus still observed Ethan. During the meal, Ethan suddenly asked, "Marcus, if you become a famous lawyer one day, would you give up your reputation to protect the person you love?" Marcus paused, then replied firmly, "Reputation doesn't feed the soul. If I had to choose, I'd choose the person I love." Naomi glanced at her brother, surprised by his bluntness. Ethan nodded slightly, as though making a private vow. After dinner, Naomi walked Marcus to the door, while Ethan remained in the living room, eyes following her. Inside him rose an undeniable truth. He had begun to need Naomi's presence more than any contract, even the fear of loss that had haunted him for years. That night, as Naomi packed up her medical supplies, Ethan called softly, "Naomi." She turned. "Yes?" He hesitated, then spoke slowly. "I've lost too much because of silence. I don't want to repeat that mistake, but I also don't want you to lose your career because of me. So, if the day comes when I cross that line, I'll leave the choice to you." Naomi stayed silent, heart pounding, but her mind reminded her of the undeniable distance between them, patient and nurse, power and ordinary. She nodded gently, saying only, "We'll deal with that day when it comes." Ethan looked at her, eyes a mixture of hope and restraint. Outside, the drizzle blurred the city lights into haze. Inside the penthouse, the two of them sat in silence. But this silence was no longer cold, heavy, expectant, like the held breath before a fire bursts into flame. Daniel Pierce had never left Naomi's mind since the day he appeared unannounced at the penthouse 2 weeks earlier. His refined appearance, tailored suit, neatly combed salt and pepper hair could not disguise the coldness in his eyes. Daniel did not look at Naomi as a person, but as an inconvenient variable in his power equation. That day, he walked straight into Ethan's bedroom without knocking, nearly making Naomi drop the medicine tray. Sitting back against the pillows with his cast-heavy leg, Ethan looked up, his grey eyes darkening. "Daniel, you came without warning." "Necessary." Daniel took a seat, opening a leather folder. "The board is restless. The Hartwell acquisition failed, and the stock price dropped." They want to know the state of your health and whether you're still lucid enough to run Caldwell Biomedical. Naomi frowned, protective instinct flaring. My patient's condition is personal medical information. You have no right. Daniel turned toward her, cutting her off with a voice smooth but edged with mockery. And who are you to intervene? A hired nurse, or something else? Naomi froze, heat rising to her face, but before she could respond, Ethan's voice sliced the air, cold as ice. Miss Carter is the only reason I'm alive right now. You will respect her, or you'll leave immediately. The air in the room solidified. Daniel narrowed his eyes, then gave a half smile. Of course, if that's what you believe. He closed the folder, setting it on the table. But remember, blind trust is the most expensive luxury in business. Since that day, Daniel appeared more frequently. Oliver Grant's worry was obvious. One evening, he pulled Naomi into the hallway. Miss Carter, I've worked for Ethan for 10 years and never seen Daniel this persistent. He's convincing the board that Ethan is weak and incapable of control. And, Oliver lowered his voice, he's using you as proof. They whisper that Ethan is entangled with his private nurse, unable to separate business from personal life. Naomi stiffened. He actually said that? No, Daniel's subtler. He plants doubt and lets it spread. Oliver gripped the folder tightly. I fear the boss is under siege from within and without. Naomi exhaled heavily. From the day she entered the penthouse, she had known there would be pressure, but she had never imagined being turned into a pawn in someone's power game. Another evening, while Naomi was checking Ethan's blood pressure, Daniel arrived again this time. 2 board members dressed impeccably, their eyes assessing like examiners. Mr. Caldwell, Daniel began, we need reassurance. Business cannot stall just because of a broken leg. Can you confirm directly that you're capable of leadership? Ethan straightened, voice sharp. I still lead Caldwell Biomedical. The numbers will prove it. Naomi glanced at the monitor, his blood pressure spiking. She cut in, he needs rest now. If this continues, I'll call Dr. Bennett. One of the board members arched a brow. Did she just threaten to call a doctor? Strange that a nurse has the authority to override a billion-dollar CEO. Daniel chuckled dryly. Exactly. That's our concern. A man once hailed as a strategic genius, now letting his health and decisions depend on the feelings of a nurse. Ethan slammed his hand against the bed rail, anger flashing in his eyes. Enough. You want to know if I'm still sane? Then listen well. I know one else built Caldwell Biomedical from nothing. I will not let an accident take it away. If you doubt me, vote. But I promise no one but me will keep this company standing. The tension was palpable. The 2 board members exchanged glances, then left with Daniel. But Naomi knew the seeds of doubt had been planted. That night, after everyone had gone, Ethan sat quietly on the bed, staring at the city lights blurred by fog outside the window. Naomi sat beside him, voice low. You can't let them keep pushing you into defense. Ethan nodded slightly, his voice rough. I know. But Daniel isn't just playing with the company. He's playing with blood by targeting you. Naomi froze. Me? Yes. They'll say you're a manipulator. They'll use your presence as proof I'm weak and have lost judgment. He turned toward her, eyes unusually serious. Naomi, you can walk away if this pressure is too much. I won't blame you. Naomi drew a steady breath, her brown eyes firm. No. I've seen my family crushed before, just because we had no voice. I won't let someone like Daniel Pierce decide where I belong, or what I do. I stay not just because of work, but because I believe in you. Ethan studied her momentarily, as if etching her face into memory. Then he nodded softly, whispering, then we fight together. A week later, Oliver's fears came true. The Boston Globe financial section ran a headline, Ethan Caldwell weakened after accident. Caldwell Biomedical faces leadership crisis. The article mentioned the Hartwell failure and hinted at a controversial personal relationship between the CEO and a private nurse. Naomi's heart sank as she read the bold letters. Though her name was not printed, everyone within the circle would know. Ethan set the paper down, his eyes colder than Boston snow. Daniel. Oliver nodded grimly. No one else has the motive or connections to leak something like this. Naomi clenched her fists, anger and helplessness colliding. They're using me as an excuse to attack you. Ethan's gaze softened briefly. No. They see us as a weakness. But weakness can turn into strength if we know how. That afternoon, Daniel returned, this time with 2 journalists. His smile was courteous, but his eyes gleamed with challenge. Ethan, the public is watching. I think transparency is best. Show them you're still in control. A few pictures with your devoted nurse, wouldn't that win hearts? Naomi froze. She understood instantly Daniel wanted to turn her into a media prop. Before Ethan could answer, she snapped, I am not PR material. Daniel raised a brow. Really? Yet here you are, in this penthouse, caring for a powerful billionaire. The public has a right to know. Ethan slammed his crutch onto the floor, the sound echoing. Enough, Daniel. Leave before I have security throw you out. The journalists fumbled to pack their cameras. Daniel gave a thin smile, bowing mockingly. Of course. But remember, Ethan, in the game of power, those who let feelings interfere always lose. The door shut, leaving a heavy silence. Naomi's hands trembled, her chest tight. Ethan looked at her, voice low. They won't stop. We need to prepare. That night, Naomi couldn't sleep. She sat in the living room, desk lamp casting a long shadow. Daniel's words replayed in her head. A nurse and a billionaire, that scandal, not love. The sound of a crutch broke her thoughts. Ethan emerged, draped in a robe. He saw her and asked quietly, You can't sleep either. Naomi forced a small smile. I was just thinking about the future, wondering if I'll ruin everything for you. Ethan stopped, his eyes resolute. Sitting across from her, he took a deep breath. Naomi, I once thought the company was everything. But when I was lying broken in that hospital bed, the only thing I remembered wasn't a balance sheet, it was your voice. If they call you my weakness, let me say it plain. You're the only reason I'm still fighting. Naomi's throat tightened. Her mind warned of boundaries, but her heart pounded harder than ever. She whispered only, You shouldn't say that, but it's the truth. His reply was steady, unwavering. The next morning, Oliver arrived with a stack of documents. Mr. Caldwell, I found this in the financial records. Daniel's been courting investors, quietly setting up his own fund. He may be planning a takeover vote at the board. Ethan flipped through the pages, the cold focus of a strategist returning to his eyes. He wants to steal Caldwell Biomedical. Naomi gripped the edge of the table. So what do we do? For the first time in days, Ethan's mouth curved into the sharp smile of a man ready for war. We show him I was never weak. That evening, Naomi walked into the study and found Ethan had cleared away the messy piles of files. In their place sat an orderly desk, computer screen glowing with a counter strategy. He looked up, eyes blazing. Naomi, from now on, you're not just a nurse. You'll be the witness that I haven't fallen. We'll strengthen it if Daniel wants to turn you into a stain. Naomi blinked. You mean, go public? Ethan nodded. Yes, no hiding. They want to use you against me, but I'll stand beside you. To show everyone I don't waver, I choose. Naomi looked at him, fear and faith swirling within. She knew the fight with Daniel Pierce was more than a power struggle. It was a test of the fragile bond growing between them. Outside, Boston lay under night, the Charles River wind cutting cold. But inside the lit penthouse, 2 people from different worlds, a nurse and a billionaire, were preparing for a battle that would decide not only the company's future, but also the fate of a love just beginning to take shape. Boston's air is fresh on an April morning after a night of rain. Naomi had just finished checking Ethan's medications when the elevator bell rang. Oliver rushed to open the door, tension flickering across his face. As the metal doors slid apart, Naomi saw 2 people step out. A woman in a black Chanel suit, silver hair in a tight bun, her bearing regal, and a tall man in a pinstripe suit, his gaze as cold as a blade. Naomi had never met them, but the way Ethan sighed told her immediately. Margaret and Charles Ashford, Claire's parents. The atmosphere in the penthouse grew heavy. Ethan pushed himself up on his crutches, forcing his voice to remain calm. Margaret, Charles, I didn't think you would come. Margaret gave a faint smile, tinged with bitterness. Ethan, we heard about your accident. Of course, we had to see how you were. You were almost like a son to us. Charles wasted no time. His eyes scanned the room, stopping on Naomi. And this is the private nurse? He pressed the word nurse as if to diminish her. Naomi gave a slight nod. Naomi Carter. I'm responsible for Mr. Caldwell's rehabilitation care. Margaret extended her hand, a handshake icy as stone. Very devoted, I suppose. Then she turned to Ethan, her gaze sharp as a blade. We need to speak privately. Ethan shook his head. Naomi stays. I have nothing to hide. The conversation quickly became a covert trial. Charles sat upright, his voice deep and unyielding. Ethan, we know Daniel Pierce has been rallying the board. We met with him. He's concerned your health, and personal choices are jeopardizing the company. Personal choices? Ethan's eyes narrowed. Margaret cut in, her tone cutting. He means your relationship with Miss Carter here. Ethan, you may think whatever you like, but the public isn't forgiving. A nurse and a billionaire, what else will they call it but exploitation? Naomi froze. Heat rushed to her face, but she forced herself still. Before she could answer, Ethan stepped forward on his crutches, his voice ice cold. Naomi saved my life. No one has the right to belittle her. Charles's jaw tightened. We're not belittling. We're protecting Claire's legacy. Our daughter loved you, trusted you. You owe her everything. And now, instead of honoring that memory, you entangle yourself in something that drags everything into doubt. Naomi's chest clenched at each word. They didn't just dismiss her. They painted her as the shadow staining Claire's memory. To them, she was nothing but an intruder. Margaret leaned forward, her voice lowered but sharp as steel. Ethan, you must choose. End this arrangement. Focus on restoring your power and your reputation. Or we will join Daniel Pierce in moving the board to remove you. The room fell deathly silent. Naomi stood frozen. Their words weren't only aimed at Ethan, they cut straight through her. She was the burden threatening him. Ethan was silent so long that Naomi thought he would yield. But then he raised his head, grey-blue eyes burning. I don't need anyone's approval to decide my life. Do what you want, but Naomi is not going anywhere. Margaret faltered momentarily, then her lips curled in a bitter smile. You're making a mistake, Ethan. The greatest mistake of your life. Charles rose, buttoning his jacket slowly. You will regret this. The two of them left, the elevator doors closing on a silence that weighed like stone. Naomi turned to Ethan, her voice catching. You just stood against them, because of me. Ethan looked at her, eyes still carrying anger but softened by rare tenderness. Not because of you, because of me. I've let others decide too many times. Not this time. Naomi wanted to believe him, but a vague fear stirred inside her. Could she stand firm against a family like the Ashfords, wealthy, powerful, and willing to use any weapon? After the doors closed, she sank into a chair, her hands trembling. She had faced condescension before, doctors dismissing nurses, wealthy patients treating her like a servant but never so direct, cold, and public. Ethan lowered himself into the chair opposite, setting his crutches aside. He watched her for a long time, then said quietly, Don't let their words wound you. They lost their daughter. In their eyes, no one could replace Claire. Naomi forced a smile, faint and thin. I don't want to replace anyone. I'm just doing my job. But to them, I'm nothing but a gold digger. Ethan's brow furrowed, his voice firm. Naomi, you are not that. I know it. You know. Naomi lifted her gaze, her brown eyes hesitant. But what about the world outside? The press, the board, investors? All they see is a brown-skinned nurse from Roxbury living in a billionaire's penthouse. What will they think but that I'm here for money? The room was still. Ethan didn't answer immediately because he knew she was right. The world was full of prejudice against class, against color, against status. But he also knew that silence would hand victory to Daniel and the Ashfords. He leaned forward, voice steady and low. Then let them think, and we'll prove the opposite. Not with words, but with actions. The next day, Naomi went to the community clinic where she volunteered on weekends. The old building in Dorchester was crowded with immigrant families waiting for free care. Though exhausted from long days at Ethan's side, Naomi felt at home here. As she entered, children ran up to hug her, and mothers smiled in relief. Naomi knelt to check a little girl with asthma, then sat with an older man who couldn't afford insulin. Here, she wasn't the billionaire's rumored lover, but simply Nurse Naomi, the one they trusted. Unexpectedly, Ethan appeared. He had come in a wheelchair, Oliver pushing him. His presence made the room fall silent for a moment. Some patients recognized his face from the news. Naomi's eyes widened. "You, what are you doing here?" Ethan looked around, his expression softening. "You said this work matters to you. I wanted to see for myself." He sat quietly, watching Naomi with her patients, then leaned toward Oliver. "This is who Caldwell Biomedical should serve. Not just the board, not just shareholders, but these people." Oliver nodded, sensing something in his iron-willed boss had shifted. News of Ethan's visit spread quickly. Online headlines read, "Billionaire Ethan Caldwell visits community clinic with private nurse." Some articles mocked, but unexpectedly, a wave of positive reactions emerged. Photos of him in a wheelchair listening to an older woman talk about medicine, laughing children around him, spreading across social media. Naomi read the comments. "Maybe he's not as cold as they say. At least he's using his money right. That woman looks genuinely dedicated." She exhaled in relief, feeling for the first time that not everyone saw her with suspicion. Yet she knew Margaret and Charles Ashford would not let this go. As expected, the following evening, Margaret called Ethan directly. Her voice cut sharply through the speaker. "What are you doing? Appearing with her at some shabby clinic? You disgrace yourself and drag Claire's name into the mud." Naomi's chest clenched as she listened. Ethan met her eyes, then answered firmly. "Margaret, Claire's honor isn't about saving face for high society. It's about saving lives. And Naomi is doing exactly what Claire believed in, caring for those no one else will." There was silence on the line. Then Margaret hung up without another word. Naomi turned away, hiding her emotions. Ethan gently placed his hand over hers, his voice warm and steady. "Let them say what they will. I've made my choice." That night, Naomi stood on the balcony, the city stretching before her, the wind biting cold. Her heart was heavy. Between fragile love and brutal reality, she feared she was nothing more than a variable that could be erased at any time. But when Ethan stepped out, draping a coat over her shoulders, she knew, at least in this moment, he was standing with her, even if it meant defying a family powerful enough to crush them both. In the days after the confrontation with Margaret and Charles Ashford, the atmosphere in the penthouse shifted. Ethan forced himself to appear calm, continuing his physical therapy. But Naomi noticed he was quieter, his gaze often distant. Oliver discreetly warned her. Daniel Pierce was tightening his grip on the board, while the Ashfords aggressively courted major shareholders. Naomi felt like a thorn in everyone's side. Each time the press published rumors about the nurse and the billionaire, she felt suffocated, not out of shame, but because she knew Ethan was paying dearly simply for keeping her at his side. One evening, as Ethan strained through painful steps, sweat dripping down his face, Naomi rushed to steady him. His breathing was ragged, eyes squeezed shut. "That's enough. We'll continue tomorrow." Ethan brushed her hand aside, voice hoarse. "No. If I stop, it means Daniel wins. I have to stand, Naomi. I have to prove I'm still me." The words pierced her heart. She knew he wasn't just fighting his injuries, but the immense shadow of doubt hanging over him. And in that war, she was the excuse others used to strike. Late at night, Naomi sat alone in the living room, staring at the medical charts on the table. A painful thought rose. Perhaps she should leave. She remembered Margaret's words. "You must choose. End it, or lose everything." They echoed in her mind, merging with the image of Ethan straining to fight the whole world. Naomi asked herself, was this fragile love worth his career, reputation, and empire he had built? When Ethan emerged on his crutches and caught her somber expression, he frowned. "What are you thinking? Looking like you're about to cry." Naomi inhaled deeply, then spoke, her voice breaking. "Ethan, maybe I should leave." He froze, gray eyes darkening. What? I don't want to be the reason you lose everything. The board, the shareholders, and the Ashfords all see me as a burden. If I go, it will be easier for you." The room plunged into dead silence. Ethan hobbled closer, his eyes a storm of anger and despair. "Naomi, do you think I want easy? I lost Claire to an unjust medical system. I won't lose you because of the arrogance of a few elites." Tears welled in Naomi's eyes, but she shook her head. "You're stronger than me. You can stand. But I've grown too used to being looked down on. I don't want you paying the price for me." Ethan gripped her shoulders, his voice cracking. "Don't do this. Don't leave me." Naomi looked at him, her heart twisting. Then she gently removed his hands, whispering, "I'm sorry." That night, Naomi packed her belongings in the small staff room. Clothes, notebooks, and small gifts Marcus had sent all folded into the suitcase. As she zipped it shut, tears spilled uncontrollably. Before leaving, she paused outside Ethan's door. The light under the frame glowed faintly, sounds muffled from within. Perhaps he was still working on reports or lying awake as he did so many nights. Naomi placed her hand on the door, whispering to herself, "Please live, even without me." Then she walked away, suitcase wheels scraping against the wood floor, the sound heavy as a farewell. Naomi left the penthouse under a drizzle. Streetlights cast her long shadow on the wet pavement, the suitcase dragging behind. She hailed a cab back to her small apartment in Roxbury, where she had lived before signing with Elite Care Solutions. The old room, with peeling walls and a low ceiling, felt worn yet comforting. As soon as she entered, she collapsed onto the bed, her pillow soaked with tears. The next morning, she returned to her shift at Boston General. Colleagues greeted her, and Naomi replied with a forced smile. To them, she was simply Naomi again, the dedicated nurse, no one knowing what had unfolded in the luxurious penthouse. But inside, she felt like she had just escaped a fleeting dream and returned to harsh reality. Meanwhile, Ethan had not slept in the penthouse. He sat on the sofa, documents scattered on the floor, and a glass of untouched wine was nearby. The pain in his leg throbbed, but all he felt was the void Naomi had left. When Oliver arrived in the morning and saw the scene, he sighed. "Mr. Caldwell, where is Miss Carter?" Ethan's voice was hoarse. "She's gone." Oliver said nothing. He had expected this, but hearing it still sank his heart. "What will you do?" Ethan stared out the window, his tone steely. "Fight. If Daniel thinks I'm weakened, I'll show him what facing a Caldwell who never breaks means. But," his voice faltered, softening, "without Naomi, it's just an empty war." Naomi tried to forget, but Ethan's image haunted her. She remembered his hoarse protests each time she checked a patient's blood pressure. Each time footsteps echoed on the hospital floor, she imagined the sound of his crutches. Marcus noticed his sister's despair. One evening, he found her sitting silently by the window. "Sis, you love him, don't you?" Naomi pressed her lips together, tears falling. "Marcus, I can't. He belongs to another world, and I won't be the reason he loses everything." Marcus sat beside her, hand on her shoulder. "I understand, but don't forget, you deserve happiness too. Don't let others decide how much you're worth." Naomi looked at him, her heart aching. Yet her reason held her back, keeping her in the safety of distance away from Ethan and the battlefield of power. On the other side, Daniel Pierce wasted no chance. He convened board meetings, whispering to shareholders that Ethan was out of control and compromised by an inappropriate relationship. The photos of Ethan at the community clinic with Naomi were twisted into proof of impulsive behavior, lacking business vision. One afternoon, Ethan practiced walking in his private study. Each step sent pain shooting through his leg, but he forced himself on, Oliver by his side. "I must stand firm in the next board meeting. I can't let Daniel see me weak." Oliver said quietly, "Mr. Caldwell, true strength isn't just in your legs. It's not walking alone. But now." He stopped, words unspoken. Ethan gripped his crutches tightly, sorrow flickering in his eyes. "I've grown used to loneliness. But this time, it hurts differently." One evening, Naomi received an email from Elite Care Solutions. "Client Ethan Caldwell requests continuation of home care." We'd like to know if you're willing to return." She read the line over and over. Her hands trembled. Her heart screamed yes, but her reason whispered no. After hours of torment, she typed her reply, "Decline, thank you." Then she dropped her head onto the desk, sobbing uncontrollably. At the penthouse, when Ethan learned Naomi had refused, he said nothing. He closed the laptop, sitting motionless, eyes empty. Oliver placed a hand on his shoulder. "Perhaps she thinks this is how she protects you." Ethan gave a faint, bitter smile. "She always thinks of others, but who will think of her?" Boston gleamed with lights outside the window, but everything sank into cold darkness inside the penthouse. Ethan knew he was about to face the greatest career battle without Naomi by his side. The Caldwell Biomedical Board meeting convened on a gloomy Monday morning. The glass headquarters tower reflected Boston's grey skies. In the top-floor boardroom, 12 members sat around a massive walnut table. At the head, the chair remained empty. Daniel Pierce stood beside the projector screen, his face polished, his voice confident. "Ladies and gentlemen, it is time to ask, is Ethan Caldwell still fit to lead? His recent accident revealed weakness. The stock price has dropped, his decisions have been erratic, and above all, he is compromised by a controversial personal relationship that damages this company's reputation." Several members nodded. Daniel pressed on. "I propose a vote of no confidence. Let us return Caldwell Biomedical to the hands of those with clarity." At that moment, the doors burst open. Ethan entered, crutches in hand but posture upright, clad in a sharp black suit. Oliver followed, rolling a case of documents. The room fell silent. Ethan stopped at the chair, scanning the table. His voice was low but carried weight. Fascinating, hearing Daniel Pierce preach about clarity, the same man who secretly sold tech data to competitors, siphoned research budgets, and created a slush fund in the Caymans to hide it all. The room erupted in murmurs. Daniel's face drained of color, though he forced a smile. "What are you talking about?" "Baseless lies." Ethan nodded to Oliver, who opened the case and produced a thick file. Ethan placed it on the table, his tone sharp as steel. "Here is proof. Bank transactions, internal emails, forged contracts. Every single one bearing your signature, Daniel." An elder board member flipped through the pages, eyes widening. "My God, is this real?" Daniel stammered. These documents are fabricated. Anyone could forge them." Ethan leaned forward, gaze like a blade. "Then explain the transfers from Caldwell's fund to your ex-wife's account in Zurich." "I have the bank's confirmation." The boardroom descended into chaos. Faces blanched, whispers flew. The head of the finance committee finally spoke. "We will need verification, but if true, this isn't just unethical, it's a federal crime." Sweat beaded on Daniel's forehead. He scanned the table for allies, but no one met his eyes. Ethan's voice cut through the storm, steady but forceful. "For months, Pierce has sabotaged me, hoping to drive me out. But instead of serving patients and advancing life-saving technology, he pocketed millions. This isn't about my health. This is about his greed." A female board member slapped her hand on the table. "I vote to suspend Daniel Pierce immediately and hand this evidence to the FBI." Hands rose around the table. Daniel's face twisted, his voice rising to a shout. "You can't." Ethan cut him off, voice icy. "You underestimated us all. And you forgot. The truth always finds its way out." Security entered, gripping Daniel by the arms. He struggled, but to no avail. His eyes burned with hatred as he spat. "Caldwell, you'll pay for this. You think you've won? The Ashfords will do what I couldn't. You will lose everything." Ethan said nothing, his grey eyes glowing with resolve. As Daniel was dragged out, Ethan turned to the board. "Now, let us return to our true purpose, saving lives. I don't ask for pity nor charity. I only demand the right to continue leading this company in the name of the legacy we promised our patients." Applause broke out. Ethan sank into the chair, and his trembling legs no longer felt like a weakness for the first time since the accident, but proof that even when struck down, he could rise again. The meeting ended in a mix of tension and relief. Members departed with thick files in hand, evidence bound for investigators. Oliver packed the case, his eyes showing the first relief in months. Ethan remained alone in the vast room. Afternoon sunlight streaked across the walnut table. The victory should have been sweet, yet all he felt was emptiness. The one person he wanted to share it with, Naomi, was not here. He remembered her standing in the living room, brown eyes shining as she said, "You're still alive." He remembered her scolding him to put down the phone, her warm hand steadying him when he almost fell. Now, all of it was silence. The next day, headlines exploded. Daniel Pierce suspended, facing federal fraud investigation. Caldwell Biomedical's stock soared. Analysts hailed Ethan's maneuver as a spectacular turnaround. But tabloids pounced too. Who is the mysterious nurse living with the billionaire? They published candid shots of Naomi at the community clinic beside Ethan. Some articles praised her dedication, but most obsessed over the class divide. Naomi read the news in her small apartment, her hands trembling. She had left to avoid being his burden, yet she was still dragged into the storm. At the hospital, whispers spread. A young doctor muttered, "It's true then." She was too close to her patient. Naomi's chest tightened, but she stayed silent, continuing her work. Meanwhile, Ethan made his next move public. He summoned a press conference, the first since the accident. The hall was packed, flashes blinding as he stepped onto the podium, leaning on crutches but exuding confidence. His voice rang clear. "Caldwell Biomedical has endured a trial. A traitor abused our trust, but truth has prevailed. This company will remain committed to innovation that saves lives. Though injured and doubted, I am still here, leading, and will not falter." Applause thundered. A reporter shouted, "Mr. Caldwell, what about the rumors of your relationship with nurse Naomi Carter? Does it affect your ability to lead?" Ethan paused. All eyes were fixed on him. He drew a deep breath, gaze unwavering. "Naomi Carter saved my life. Not only on the night of the accident, but every day I wanted to give up. If I stand here today, it is because of her, and I will never be ashamed of trusting someone like that." The hall erupted in murmurs. Questions flew, but Ethan descended the stage, leaving the noise behind. That evening, Naomi sat frozen before the TV, hearing his every word. Her hand pressed to her chest, tears streaming. All those days she had blamed herself, convinced she was his burden, yet he had stood before hundreds of cameras and declared that she was the reason he endured. Marcus emerged from the kitchen, saw his sister crying, and sat beside her. "You still have a chance, but you must choose. Keep running, or go back and fight beside the man who chose you." Naomi wiped her tears, her heart surging. She allowed herself to believe for the first time in weeks maybe this love was not a mistake. On the penthouse balcony, Ethan gazed at Boston glittering beneath him. He knew that after Daniel, the Ashfords were waiting to strike. But in that moment, his thoughts were not of enemies but of Naomi. And silently, he wished she would return before the next storm hit. Naomi returned to the hospital for her night shift after the press conference. The entire ward buzzed with Ethan's declaration. A colleague leaned close, whispering, "He mentioned your name on live television. Did you know?" Naomi blushed, only nodding slightly before throwing herself into work. But inside, her heart raced. She repeated his words repeatedly. "I will never be ashamed of trusting a person like that." Ethan hadn't just defended her but stood beside her before the entire world. Naomi exited the hospital gates when her shift ended and saw the familiar black limousine waiting. Oliver stood by, his weary smile gentle. "Miss Carter, Mr. Caldwell would like to see you. If you agree." Naomi hesitated. Part of her wanted to run straight back to her small apartment, to hide from prying eyes. But another part, stronger, urged her forward. She nodded. The car took her to a park along the Charles River. The Boston night was crisp, wind whispering through the trees, city lights shimmering across the water. Ethan sat on a stone bench, with no crutches and only a polished wooden cane. When Naomi approached, he looked up. "Thank you for coming," his voice low, slightly hoarse. Naomi sat, heart pounding. "You should be resting, not wandering outside in this weather." Ethan smiled faintly. "I've learned to listen to you more than before. But some things, I need to say where there are no glass walls or boardroom tables." He drew out a small velvet box from his coat and placed it in her hands. Naomi's eyes widened, her fingers trembling. "Ethan." His grey eyes gleamed beneath the city lights. "Naomi Carter, I once lost everything because I thought I was invincible. Then I nearly lost again when you walked out of my life. Tonight, I refuse to miss another chance. Stay not as my nurse, but as my partner. Marry me." Naomi froze. Her entire body shook, shocked, overwhelmed, afraid. "Ethan, do you know what we'll face? The press, the board, the Ashfords'll never accept this." Ethan's smile deepened, his voice firm. "I've faced Daniel Pierce. I've faced my own fears. Facing public opinion and the Ashfords, what is that, compared to having you?" Tears welled in Naomi's eyes. She wanted to say yes, but the memory of sneers and contempt made her throat tighten. "Ethan, I don't want you to lose everything because of me." He clasped her hand tightly. "Naomi, you don't take anything from me. You give me the reason to fight. If I lose, I only lose when you're not by my side." The wind swept her hair, and the river glimmered. She saw not the ruthless billionaire the world knew, but a man trembling as he waited for her answer. She understood. This choice would decide their love and her life. Naomi stared at the velvet box. Inside lay a simple platinum ring with a deep sapphire, not flashy, but proud and enduring, just like the way Ethan looked at her. "Are you sure?" she whispered, voice trembling. "Do you realize you're risking your honor, your company?" Ethan shook his head, gaze both gentle and resolute. "No, Naomi. This isn't a gamble. This is the only choice I will never regret. I've lived half my life in fear, in coldness. You pulled me out. I don't want to go back." Naomi's heart clenched. His words shattered every wall she had built around herself. For years, she had lived only for duty, bracing against scorn. For the first time, someone saw her not as a nurse or a woman beneath his class, but as his entire world. Tears spilled freely. She nodded. "Yes, I will." Ethan sank to one knee at once, pain flashing across his face from the injury. Oliver almost rushed forward from a distance, then stopped when he saw his employer's radiant smile. Ethan slipped the ring onto Naomi's trembling hand, whispering, "From now on, there are no two worlds. Only one." Naomi broke down, throwing her arms around him. Their breath mingled, their hearts thundered in the night air. Ethan murmured in her ear, "Do you know, the first moment I wanted to live truly was when I woke and saw you beside my hospital bed." Naomi held him tighter, whispering back, "And the first time I believed I was worthy of love was when you said you'd never be ashamed of me." The next morning, the press exploded. A passerby had snapped a photo of them embracing by the river, the ring on Naomi's hand sparkling beneath the streetlights. Headlines blared everywhere. "Billionaire Ethan Caldwell proposes to nurse Naomi Carter in romantic Boston night." Reactions split. Some hailed a fairy tale romance, others sneered about an opportunist achieving her goal. But this time, Naomi didn't hide. She stood before the mirror in her small apartment, gazing at the ring, whispering, "They can say anything, but this is my truth." Marcus stayed silent momentarily when he saw the ring, then smiled. "He dared to stand by you before the world. Then I'll stand by him so long as he never makes you cry alone again." Naomi hugged her brother, knowing her family was ready to face the storm with her. At the penthouse, Ethan stood by the window, fingertips brushing the cold glass. Behind him, Naomi brewed tea, calm and steady. When he turned, their eyes met and he realized, amid all the chaos of media, boardrooms, and the Ashfords, this was the one certainty he had found. The woman who was home, whom he once thought he'd never have. Just days after Naomi accepted Ethan's proposal, an unexpected blow struck. Carmen Carter, Naomi's mother, collapsed during her shift at the diner. Naomi got the call while sitting with Ethan, reviewing plans for the next board meeting. "Naomi, they admitted me. The doctor says they need a biopsy right away. It might be cancer." Carmen's voice was weak but steady. Naomi froze. She rushed to Boston General, but Ethan insisted on coming with her. In the stark white hospital room, Carmen lay frail, her eyes still carrying the same gentle warmth. "I'm fine, sweetheart," she whispered, squeezing Naomi's hand. "It's just tests. Don't worry." But when the doctor walked in, his face was grave. "The tumor in her pancreas has spread to the lymph nodes. We need to start treatment immediately. Standard chemotherapy will only buy time. There is a trial protocol at Mass General Cancer Center, but it's costly." Naomi's head spun. Before she could even speak, Ethan asked, "How much?" $400,000 for the full course. Naomi turned to him in shock. "Ethan, no, you can't." But his gaze was steady. "Naomi, this is your mother, and soon she'll be ours." The news shook Naomi to her core. She wrestled between her duty as a daughter and her fear of being branded a gold digger. But Ethan never wavered. He lined up the best oncologists, called the cancer center himself, and signed the check without hesitation. One night, as Naomi sat dazed by her mother's bedside, Ethan entered with an audacious idea. He sat down beside her, taking her hand. "Naomi, we planned a grand wedding, but time isn't on your mother's side. Let's do it here. Let her see it. Let her know you'll never be alone." Naomi's eyes widened. "You mean a wedding in the hospital?" Ethan nodded, his gray eyes shining. "Tomorrow. No lavish flowers, no orchestra. In front of your mother, just a vow that I'll never leave you." Naomi covered her mouth, tears spilling. She turned to Carmen. Her mother smiled weakly, whispering, "Sweetheart, what more could I want than to see you happy?" The next day, the hospital pulsed with a quiet energy. Nurses arranged wildflowers in jars. A medical student brought a guitar. Naomi's colleagues pulled together a simple white dress. When Naomi entered the room, her heart raced. Ethan stood tall in a navy suit, leaning on his cane but radiating strength. Carmen sat in a wheelchair, brighter than Naomi had seen her in weeks. Marcus hovered protectively at her side, proud and nervous. The hospital chaplain began the vows. Naomi felt as if she were dreaming. The room brimmed with warmth, no scorn, no suspicion, only love. "Do you, Naomi Carter, take Ethan Caldwell, in sickness and health, in wealth and in want, for all your life?" Naomi's eyes locked on Ethan's. Smiling through tears, she said, "I do." The chaplain's voice mingled with the soft beeping of Carmen's monitors. Noon sunlight filtered through the blinds, painting Naomi and Ethan's faces in gold. "And do you, Ethan Caldwell, take Naomi Carter, in sickness and health, in wealth and in want, for all your life?" Ethan's eyes shone with fierce resolve. "I do, with all my heart." Naomi broke down, sobs shaking her. Ethan gently wiped her cheeks, his hand trembling. Then he drew the platinum sapphire ring from his pocket, the same he had given her by the river, and slid it onto her finger again. Before everyone, Marcus handed his sister a small bouquet of wildflowers. Her hand trembled as she held it, but her heart was steady. When the chaplain pronounced them husband and wife, the room erupted in applause, the guitar strumming softly. Carmen wept, her frail shoulders shaking. "God, let me see this day. My daughter is finally loved as she deserves." Naomi clung to her, whispering, "Mama, I promise I'll be happy." Ethan leaned down, kissing his new mother-in-law's forehead. "Thank you for trusting me." That night, Ethan and Naomi didn't return to the penthouse. They stayed in the hospital, sleeping beside Carmen. No honeymoon, no ballroom reception, but both knew this was the most beautiful beginning they could have asked for. Under the dim hospital light, Ethan clasped Naomi's hand. "Tomorrow, the world may roar again. The Ashfords may attack, the press may sneer, but tonight, it's just us." Naomi rested her head on his shoulder, whispering, "As long as you're here, I'm not afraid of anything." The story of the hospital wedding spread quickly. Headlines blared, "Billionaire marries nurse in hospital room love story amid the storm." Some mocked it as a PR stunt, but many were moved by the image. A powerful man kneeling in a hospital room, slipping a ring on a woman's hand. Ethan declined interviews. He issued only one statement: "I have found the family I once thought I would never have. Nothing else matters." Naomi read those words, her heart trembling but steady. For the first time, she no longer felt like an outsider. She felt chosen, loved, and finally at home beside a man who had once known only power and loneliness. Meanwhile, Margaret and Charles Ashford read the news in their opulent estate. Margaret set the paper down, her face rigid. Charles clenched his crystal glass, his voice low and thunderous. If Caldwell thinks he can trample Claire's memory like this, he is mistaken. The game is far from over. Darkness loomed again. But in that fragile moment of peace, Naomi and Ethan believed their newly lit love was strong enough to withstand whatever storm came next. After the hospital wedding, Naomi and Ethan entered a rare stretch of peace. Carmen began her experimental treatment days of exhaustion, but also mornings where she smiled at the sight of her daughter and son-in-law walking into her room hand in hand. Naomi continued working at Boston General, though she reduced her hours to spend more time with her mother and Ethan. Some colleagues looked at her differently now. Curiosity in some eyes, envy in others, quiet admiration in a few. Naomi no longer cared. She had learned to hold her head high, to endure whispers, because she finally had something solid to lean on. Ethan returned to work with a different presence. He was no longer just the cold CEO. He became a leader who listened. In meetings, he spoke of real patients, of neglected communities. Some shareholders frowned, but many younger employees felt inspired. One evening, after Ethan finished an internal presentation on equitable medical technology, Naomi slipped into his office and sat beside him. "You've changed so much," she murmured. Ethan smiled faintly, looking down at his hands. "It's not that I changed. I just finally remembered what I once promised Claire. She wanted me to use my mind to save lives, but I turned it into a weapon to prove myself. It was you who pulled me back." Naomi placed her hand over his, warmth grounding them both. At that moment, they believed they had found a true path together, genuine happiness. But happiness proved as fragile as morning mist. One night, Oliver hurried into the penthouse, clutching a file. His face was tense. "Mr. Caldwell, Miss Carter, something's wrong." Ethan frowned. "What is it?" Oliver laid the folder on the table. Inside was a copy of a court filing. The Ashfords had petitioned to annul Ethan and Naomi's marriage, claiming lack of mental capacity after the accident and undue influence from a private caregiver. Naomi froze, as if slapped. "They're saying you couldn't choose to marry me." Ethan's hand tightened on the chair, his grey eyes blazing. "Yes, this is their move. Daniel failed. Now it's Ashford's turn. They don't care about me. They want to erase you." Naomi's hands trembled. "Ethan, if the court listens to them, what will I be? A manipulator? A fraudulent wife?" Ethan pulled her into his arms. "No, I won't let them. Do you hear me? I'd rather lose the company, lose everything than lose you." Yet in his eyes, Naomi saw it. Fear, real fear that the world outside, with its ruthless laws and cruel prejudices, could still tear them apart. The news of the lawsuit spread within 2 days. Headlines blared. "Parents of late Claire Ashford challenge billionaire's new marriage." Comments flooded in. "Of course she's using him. A nurse marrying a billionaire?" Clear motives. Naomi avoided the articles, but the words seeped into her phone, into whispers at the hospital. Some co-workers offered comfort. Others kept their distance. She felt herself slipping back into the old role, the outsider. As they prepared for court, Ethan worked with top attorneys. Marcus joined in, combing through the Ashfords' history. "Naomi, they've done this before," Marcus said grimly. "In 1998, they tried to declare their own grandfather incompetent to seize control of the family trust. It was thrown out. This is the same play." Naomi sat stunned, her heart heavy for both Ethan and herself. "Do you think we can win this time?" Marcus squeezed her shoulder. "If you trust him, we have a chance." On the day of the hearing, the courthouse steps swarmed with press. Cameras flashed as Ethan and Naomi walked in. He was in a sharp black suit, with a cane steady in hand. She was in a simple navy dress, her head held high. Inside, the Ashfords' lawyer thundered, "Your Honor, Mr. Caldwell suffered a severe brain injury. His subsequent decisions, including his marriage to Miss Carter, cannot reflect sound judgment. We have medical experts to testify." A neurologist took the stand. describing potential long-term cognitive effects. Naomi's stomach dropped, but then Ethan's lawyer countered with reports from Dr. Bennett. Recent tests prove Mr. Caldwell's cognitive faculties are fully intact. Finally, Ethan himself was called. He rose, leaning on his cane, and faced the judge. His voice carried, slow but resolute, "I know this trial is not just about my capacity, it's about my love. But let me be clear, I was not coerced. I was not impaired. I chose Naomi Carter because she saw me when the world saw only a ruthless man or a broken patient. If that is called incapacity, then so be it. But I believe it is the greatest capacity of all, to love, trust, and rise from loss." The courtroom fell silent. Naomi's eyes blurred with tears. She had never heard him speak of them this way before. At last, the judge's gavel came down. "There is insufficient evidence to establish incapacity. The petition is denied." Naomi broke down in tears right there. Ethan turned, gripping her hand, whispering, "I told you I wouldn't let them take you from me." Across the aisle, Margaret Ashford sat stone-faced while Charles's jaw clenched white. They withdrew, but their eyes promised one thing: this fight was far from over. That night in the penthouse, Ethan and Naomi sat by the window, the Boston skyline glittering like a river of stars. Outside, the storm of public opinion still raged, but in that moment, they knew they had survived one of their harshest trials. Naomi leaned against her husband's shoulder, whispering, "I never thought I could come this far." Ethan kissed her hair softly, "And we're only just beginning." Their happiness was fragile, but perhaps that fragility made it precious. The Ashfords, the world's prejudices, the battles yet to come, they all still loomed. But Naomi knew one thing now: she would not run. And Ethan, once convinced that love was weakness, finally understood. It was the only strength that kept him standing.